Today's reading is taken from Psalm number 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. A year ago, at the end of Mental Health Awareness Week, we had what we called Mental Health Sunday in church. We wanted to do it again this year, but obviously that wasn't an option. But we decided that since it is the end of Mental Health Awareness Week, I should talk about it again. And I tried to think of a funny way to lead into this talk, as anyone who's heard me speak a few times will realise, certainly anyone in my own church will realise, I like to be funny. I like to lead in with something funny, something interesting, something to kind of ease us in. I like having fun in church. I think you like it more. I certainly like it more. I think it makes this bit where you get spoken at, it's basically a lecture, this whole religious lecture bit, more enjoyable for everyone. And I want us to feel relaxed. I want us to have fun. I want us to enjoy church. It's in my interest for you to enjoy church. The problem is, it's kind of hard to find something funny to lead into mental health disorders. Because, I suppose you could say, mental illness isn't funny. And that's probably a fairly reasonable opinion. Most of you who know me will know that I suffer from anxiety. And I thought that there was one story that was pretty funny that gives a good sense of what living with anxiety is like for me. I took a wedding but over a year ago now for St Michael's and All Angels in Windmill Hill. I was covering for Andrew, their vicar. And they were a great couple. They couldn't have been easier to deal with. And they had a gorgeous baby girl who was brilliant through the whole service, didn't make any noise, was just brilliant and cute and photogenic. And everybody read well, everybody did their jobs well. Even me, in spite of myself, did a good job. And it couldn't have gone better. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I had a great day. So after they've all gone, and the church is tidied up and locked up, and all the background stuff that you guys don't see was done, I go to my car and I sat there for a minute, and I just took a minute to feel pleased with myself. I took a minute to enjoy it. And I sat there and I thought, that's the best wedding I've ever done. That couldn't possibly have gone better. Wasn't that good? And then it occurs to me, what if that's the best wedding I ever take? What if every wedding I take from now on sucks compared to this one? What if I never do a good wedding again? What if I've peaked? Maybe it wasn't even that good in the first place. Maybe it was a rubbish wedding. Did I actually mess up the whole thing? Maybe they hate me now. Maybe they've always hated me. Maybe they're talking about me and how bad a job I did right now at their wedding reception. Maybe I did the paperwork wrong. What if they're not even actually legally married? I'm probably the worst priest that there's ever been. Now, you may agree with that statement, and it's not always that extreme. I wasn't having a good week. That was the same week that in a meeting with other clergy in the deanery, friends who I trust, I concluded they all hated me. It's not rational. And as some people say, you have to laugh or you'd cry. I'm not sure that that's true. I think I have to laugh because it's funny, and I've never been very good at holding it in when I think something's funny. It's not an exact science, but in very broad boxes, I would say that I have generalized anxiety disorder, which means I can become irrationally worried or frightened, and body dysmorphic disorder, which means I look in a mirror and I see a fat, ugly person, regardless of whether I am or not. The debate is pointless. For the most part, I'm able to manage mine. It's not constant, it comes in waves. Sometimes it's worse than other times, and most people don't notice there's anything wrong when I am quite bad, unless I'm really bad, but that's really pretty rare, and I've gotten quite good at finding excuses to not be around. It can be brought on by stress or tiredness. It can be brought on by things in my life upsetting me. But sometimes it just happens. There's nothing wrong, nothing's provoked it just happens. I just wake up some mornings like that. And I've always been like this as far as I can remember. I can't remember a time, even back to when I was 5, 6 years old, when I wasn't like this. I can remember being in the toilet for an hour. I must have been like 5 or 6. It was just after my grandpa died. And I remember I sat frightened in the bathroom for an hour because I was afraid of what was on the other side of the door. And I'm not telling you this because I want your sympathy or because I want you to treat me differently. I really, really don't. In fact, I'd be quite upset if this caused you to treat me differently. I'm telling you this because I'm trying to break something. I'm trying to break the silence that I've experienced in church. I'm trying to break the image of a good Christian being mentally healthy. I'm trying to show you a church leader with mental illness. And it surprises people when they find out, because I don't seem anxious. I seem big and loud and charismatic and confident. And that's because I am, though I must admit I sometimes fake it. My anxiety doesn't define me. It's not who I am. It's something I have, not who I am. And I don't want you to treat me like someone with anxiety. I want you to treat me like Sam. Love me or hate me or think I'm an idiot. I don't really care. But whatever your opinion of me, I want it to be based on who I am, not a condition that I have. 1 in 4 people suffer from some sort of mental health disorder at some point in their lives, which means roughly a quarter of people watching have experienced it personally, and pretty much everyone will have experienced it secondhand, like a friend or a family member. It's a statistical inevitability. So pick 4 people. Call to mind 4 people you know really, really well. At least one of them. You might not know about it. They might not talk about it. They may never admit it to anyone. They may be one of your closest friends. You may have known them for decades. And they've never told you. I think that's particularly true for Christians, because Christians often feel like they're somehow failing in their faith by having a mental health disorder. I never spoke about it because I was embarrassed, because I was ashamed, because I was worried about how people would react. I certainly never spoke about it in church, because in church you feel like if I admit this, I'm admitting that I'm not doing Christianity properly. If I admit to these problems, I'm admitting that I'm not a very good Christian. Like I'm admitting some sort of sin, like I don't trust God, like I'm failing somehow. I felt that my anxiety was sinful. And that may seem ridiculous to you. I really, really hope it does. You may think that no one would ever say that, and in most churches you'd be right, but I'm afraid you're not totally right. But by not saying anything, it's implied, whether it's meant to be or not. 1 in 4 people have a mental health disorder, and yet the church doesn't talk about it. For all the talk we do, this major issue, we're eerily silent. This leads to Christians not talking about their mental health, feeling embarrassed, ashamed, feeling like they've failed God. Our silence implies sinfulness. Our silence on the topic implies that something is wrong. The fact that nobody said anything made me feel like everybody thought it was sinful. I can't remember a single time I've heard a sermon on mental health. A single time I've heard it from the front, except, the time I did it last year. I can only think of one other church leader who I've seen publicly admit to a mental health disorder, and he did it nervously and quietly, timidly, really. And I don't mean that as an insult, because I'm talking about a man that I love, but he felt ashamed of his depression. He was frightened of talking about it. Why? We don't think it's sinful. We don't think that people with depression or anxiety or anorexia or anything else have failed God. We don't think that, do we? But the fact that nobody spoke about it, the fact that it was a secret, something I felt I couldn't talk about, made me feel I was doing something wrong. We don't think that. And if you do think that, you're wrong. And frankly, it's bad theology. If someone breaks their leg, we don't say that they've failed God. If someone gets cancer, we don't say they've failed God. If someone takes statins to lower their cholesterol, hell of a word to say on a camera. If someone takes statins to lower their cholesterol, we don't think that they've failed God. So why would we think that someone has failed God because they have to take serotonin to manage their depression? Why would we think someone has failed God because they take beta blockers? Why would we think that someone has failed God because their brain is lying to them about their body? It's the same, it's illness, and the theology is the same as with any other illness. So I want to say to people who don't suffer a mental health condition, treat a mental health disorder in the same way that you would treat any other illness. Be sensitive, be kind, pray for them, love them. One of the best things about being part of a Christian community, and the thing I'm missing most in lockdown, is that we support one another through difficult times, that we hold each other up when we can't hold ourselves up. That's the point of a church. You get me through when I can't get myself through, and that is what we're supposed to do. 1 Peter says, above all, love one another. The Apostle Peter telling us that above all other priorities and activities, more important than anything else we do or say, is that we should love one another. That's what this community, our church community at St. Barnabas, and any other church community represented in our audience, that's what it's for. And when people are going through mental illness, they need your love, not your awkward silence. The Christian community should support people through mental illness, not make them feel like they have to hide it. So talk about it. Ask how someone is. Don't be afraid. Don't be awkward. Just be kind. That's Christianity 101. Be nice to people. And to those who do or have suffered with mental illness, I want to say something to you directly. You are not broken. You are not worthless. You have never been forgotten. You have not failed God. You are not unreachable. I know, believe me, I know, that sometimes it doesn't feel very good, that sometimes it's difficult, that sometimes it's painful. But God's always going to be there, no matter what. Sometimes it's going to hurt, but that's okay. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to struggle. Some days it's hard to get up and go to church. And on those days, you got there. On days like that, you got there and that's enough. You made it. Well done. I have days like that and I usually have to preach. And if you didn't make it, it's okay. We'll try again next week. If you're able to manage without medication, well done. You're brave and you're strong. God be with you. I don't take pills. I have my own reasons for that. Ask me later if you're interested. But if one day you decide you need the pills, well done. You're brave and you're strong. God be with you. God bless your pills. Bring them to me. I'll do the magic hands on them. Because it is by His grace that you have those pills. And it takes a lot of strength and a lot of bravery to admit that you need help. Most importantly, you don't have to hide. You don't have to be ashamed. We love you and God loves you. I don't know why it hurts. I don't know why I'm like this. I don't know why you're like this. Maybe it's because of trauma or experience. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's genetic. Maybe it's chemical. I don't know. I'm not pretending to. But I know God can make good out of pain. God is the God of resurrection and restoration. God is a God who meets us in our weakness and in our lows. And God can use your wounds. Not in spite of your pain, but because of it, God can use you. He can use your scars. Henry Nouwen said, "Nobody escapes being wounded. We are all wounded people, whether physically emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. The main question is not how can we hide our wounds so we don't have to be embarrassed, but how can we put our woundedness in the service of others? When our wounds cease to be a source of shame and become a source of healing, we have become wounded healers. Your wounds don't make you less valuable. Your wounds don't change how God sees you or make her stop wanting to use you. God takes weakness and makes it strength. She is the God of weakness. And God showed that through his ultimate victory. God's victory in his greatest moment of weakness. God's victory was in his greatest moment of weakness on the cross. His greatest victory the world saw as defeat. And I've said before, God won by losing. And after his resurrection, he had to prove to his disciples, do you remember this story? He had to prove to his disciples, one of his disciples, that he was real. Thomas said that he didn't believe he was real. He had to prove it. Do you remember how he did it? He showed Thomas his scars. He showed him the scars from his crucifixion. He proved that he was the real Messiah by showing Thomas his scars. Jesus wasn't embarrassed by his scars. He wasn't embarrassed by his weakness. He wasn't embarrassed about the fights he'd won. He wasn't embarrassed about the damage he'd suffered. Because his weakness was used to redeem the whole world. Our God's a God of weakness. And God can use your weakness to help others. I don't know why it hurts. But I know that God still wants us. I know that God is still there when it hurts. I know that God loves us, even the bits that hurt. I know that the church is meant to hold us up and love us in the hard times. I know that your mental illness doesn't make you a bad Christian. But it has to be okay to talk about these things. It has to be okay to say it out loud. It has to be okay to be mentally ill. Don't hide. Don't be embarrassed. And don't be ashamed of your scars. Because Jesus isn't ashamed of his.